Hello again, YouTube. So today I wanted to take us through a track which I created. Working title was Round and About, and the inspiration for this was a kind of Jacob Collier-esque groove that I came up with. So I'm particularly keen to show you some of the percussion arranging on this. Not so much the mix, although I did do a rough mix myself. Ultimately I got this externally mixed, but it's more about the arrangement, coming up with these different interlocking parts and just kind of showing you how it all works structure-wise. First of all, let's just take a listen to the track. So my aims when I was creating this was that I wanted to make something that had just a fun upbeat vibe and that wasn't too distracting, so that I could use it as a kind of bubbly underscore bed while I was talking on other YouTube videos. So that was what the track was for. I got a little bit carried away, so there's lots of little quirky elements in there I sort of couldn't resist. But yeah, let's just have a quick listen to the track to begin with. So here's the final mixed version. I won't play through the whole thing, but if you want to check out the full track without any talking or anything, I'll post a link to another video where I've just uploaded the track for you to listen to uninterrupted. So we've got a little percussion intro here. That takes us to our main sort of A section groove thing. That's our hook. Then it settles into this slightly more conventional groove. It's in 4, but it's sort of based on the initial opening section. And then I'll just skip through a little bit. So now we hit this B section. And we've gone back into 7 again, although it's not too in your face, so hopefully I can get away with it. And again, I'll just skip forward a little bit. So we go back to our home key, so that previous section went to the 4, now we're back to the 1. The hook again. And then this is a slightly developed version of our sort of more friendly A section in 4, which we passed earlier. And then that takes us to the breakdown. So the bass is out. And then the bass does some nice long notes here. Vocal ad-libs. Big drum fill. And then yeah, it basically goes on like that to the end, and then we've got the hook. And then a weird little kind of wiggly sound at the end. So that's our track. So I'll just yeah, that's the basic structure. So it's built around initially this groove in 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And that is a combination of different elements. The first thing that I came up with was this groove using my hands on something called a Renaissance drum, which is it was a recent drum that I bought. Let's see if I can grab it quickly. Here it is. So I was just using my hands on this. And what's great about this drum is it has little things on the side that you can move up and down, which change the tuning of the drum very easily. So I was able to find something that had about the right pitch, where it didn't sound too boomy and too moody, but it had a slightly more light kind of quality. Stick that back on the shelf. So let's see if we can find that to listen to. Here we go. I've called it frame drum in the session, although it's not a frame drum. And that's something that I actually originally recorded in at a slower tempo. It's as if the information or the ideas kind of download at a slightly lower lower speed or whatever, and so then sometimes it helps to use things like flex time or vary speed to push everything up a notch, and often that helps the amount of information density to sort of increase, and that often makes things feel a bit more exciting and a bit more interesting. So I'll just solo the percussion overall here. So one of the things that's really helping things tick along is this layer, which I've called body percussion, because it's me playing body percussion on my thighs, I think, and also some offbeat claps. So it's made up of basically two components. Here's one. That's just me clapping. And in relation to the click, it's like this. So I'm clicking off the beat. And then the second layer is like this. Just with the click, it sounds like this. 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And so, yeah, that's literally me just slapping on my thighs like this. And that sounds really cool. It sort of helps to just gel everything else together and just adds this nice little ticky, very organic sounding layer. And it kind of just helps the other elements pop a little bit. Especially when you start bringing in those programmed percussion parts. So yeah, I was very much wanting to have a dominant sound of organic percussion, natural percussion sounds made from real instruments, or in this case, real body parts, and then combine that with some slightly more beefy synthetic drum sounds. I think one of the things that I really like about Jacob Collier's music, especially some of the grooves on the in Your Room, In My Room, is that what it's called? That album. There's some really nice combinations of that sort of hybrid sound where there's so much tasty information coming from live parts and things where it's definitely not quantized. You can hear the sort of the skin if it's like hand percussion, or you can hear the detail of the brushes or the shakers or whatever. There's all of that going on, but then there's also really nice, punchy, very tightly controlled elements as well. So you have that sort of controlled chaos sound, which is what I was going for. So one of the other sounds that I kind of stole from the Jacob Collier sound palette is this, what I call a wiggle drum. Sort of similar to a tabla, which is an traditional Indian drum, tabla baya. This is something that you couldn't really get, I don't think, so cleanly anyway, with a live source. So what I've done here is taken it's a Dolek sample from a sample library called Ethno World 5. They're not fantastically detailed, these samples, but there's some really nice colors in there, and they also come with some live loop performances. But in this case, I triggered everything myself using a sample pad, and then I assigned a expression pedal to the pitch modulation, and I increased the pitch mod range to 24, so 2 octaves. When you move the pedal, the sound jumps up 2 octaves, and so I was able to program and sort of live in real time play the drum pads on my MIDI controller, triggering this Dolek sound, and then with my pedal I was able to modulate the pitch at the same time, and that was a really fun way to come up with a groove that incorporated the pitch mod while having both hands free to play. So let's have another quick listen to that. So I've got this kind of two-tone thing happening where you can hear it's shifting between a sort of low group of sounds and then a high group of sounds, and that's dependent on my foot position. So in context, if we just break down some of the layers in this section, so we've got some kicks. These are programmed. We've got just an offbeat hi-hat sample. We've got some live kit bits. So that's a live snare drum. Got that in the mix. We've got some cymbals. These are a mixture of live and samples. Then we've got a live hi-hat, which is just me doing a simple foot pedal pattern. And what's cool about that is it's a very regular pattern, but because the groove here is in 7, then the placement flips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's a really fun thing to kind of help to stabilize a groove that's in an unusual time signature, is to have another part that's in 2 or in 4, sort of playing over the top, and then it helps to sometimes gel things and just make things sound a little bit more accessible. We've got some tambourine, which is live. I mean, that's the sort of part where you'd think maybe just use a sample, but I mean, there's a consistent tambourine part throughout this track, and it's filled with, you know, very simple but important details, which, things like that, where I just wanted to have a sound that was really consistent, no cheats, no tricks, no messing around. And it's amazing how even with the simplest shaker parts and tambourine parts, when you do them live and with the intention of that role that they're supposed to have in the track at that particular moment, it's amazing how much better it sounds compared to using a sample. So then we've got the body percussion, which we've already discussed. We've got a clave thing, which I was quite pleased with myself for this. I just did a really radical EQ move on me hitting a guiro at just a certain point. The guiro looks like this, and I found just a nice spot somewhere along maybe around there where it was particularly resonant, and then I just boosted the part of the sound that I liked very, very sharply, and that gave me this sound. And I added a bit of reverb as well. I should note that the tracks that I'm playing through, this is like my working copy of the Logic session. So there's a slight difference between what you're hearing in the Logic project here, these stems that I'm playing, and the final mix. So things like reverb, take with a pinch of salt, because a lot of that will have changed by the time we get around to the final mix. So then we've got the frame drum, which we've already heard, and we've got a quirky. Now, a quirky is actually doesn't normally sound like this. The quirky is the Austin Powers instrument, you know, like the kind of sound which is associated with samba. It's that kind of squeaky, sounds like a monkey. It's sometimes called a monkey drum. But in this case, I used it as just a little hand percussion, and it has a really nice tone to it. And so that kind of works as a counterpoint to the frame drum. Just kind of adds that secondary layer. But it's almost as if you're hearing one instrument there, so those two definitely work as a kind of pair. Then we've got tasty bell thing from the Logic stock samples. Then we've got the wiggle drum, which we talked about, and we've got the guiro, more conventional way of playing the guiro. And wow, there's quite a lot here. And then we've got percussion extras, which isn't doing anything in this part. We've got percussion doing. Depending on what device you're listening to, you may not be able to hear this because it's super low. But it's something that just goes doing. And that was really important to this initial groove in just filling out the low end. I think it was like the third or fourth element that I came up with when writing this track, or came up with. I sort of stumbled upon it while browsing through sounds in the drum machine library. So that's the context. I don't know if you can hear that. It just had this really nice like low end push, which was exactly the kind of sound world that I wanted. And it kind of inspired me to kind of head towards this wiggle drum / tabla sort of sound later on in the track. So that's the majority of the percussion. So let's just hear it all together. And then I'll skip through a bit more. It's all the same kind of elements. Bring in some hand claps later on during the breakdown. These are, again, a mixture of real hand claps and samples, just to beef them out a little bit. these little fills and things were generally done live using some percussion that I've got here set up in the studio and some sticks, and just really going for it. So I'll just play a bit of the live kit things here so you can hear it. There's a djembe there, some toms. This thing is a tamborim, which is a salsa instrument. And so in general, the way that I approached writing these was very much just playing them, improvising in the moment, just hearing what I wanted, what I felt was necessary to fill out the texture, fill out the sound a little bit. Got some vocal samples that have somehow made it into the percussion stem there. Okay, let's move on from percussion now and take a look at some of the vocal elements really quickly. So quite subtle. I'm not particularly much of a singer, but my intention was, because I wanted to create something that was an underscore bed. All of the vocals are wordless vocals, and they're just designed to sort of sit there and create a nice human sounding chorus, which just gives you that nice sort of jolly feeling. So let's just listen a bit on its own. Definitely not the strongest singer, but it sounds pretty good when you layer them up. So here I've got only a couple of layers, 3, 4. Pass of ad-libs. Oof, that was a bit ropey. We've got some oohs later. Let's hear those in context. Again, quite subtle. We've got some ba-da-ba, which we heard earlier. Done a very radical EQ move there, just to make it sound like those kind of telephone vocals, you know, Britney Spears style. And then singing the vocal hook at the end. Yeah, like I didn't really bother tuning these a whole lot. I think mostly because, well, they're just fine, aren't they? I mean, I think in the context of the track, I don't like to overtune things or just tune things unnecessarily. Just be very intentional whenever I'm doing pitch correction type stuff. And then the other element is this kind of vocal send-off thing. Ole! So that was just a silly thing that I decided to put in the end. It sounds like this. Just that kind of live band feel, you know, just makes me happy. And then, yeah, we got some sax next. Let's just isolate that. There's actually another layer, I don't know if you noticed, that's snuck into that group. And that is an Omatone, which is a very exciting instrument, which if you haven't met the Omatone yet, I recommend that you do so. In fact, let's see if he wants to say hello. So we've got the only instrument which I own which has a face. So you can kind of add vibrato with your finger. And then you can do kind of staccato-y things. So it's extremely fun. And yeah, whoops. Bye-bye. And so that's that. I just thought I'd add that as a layer. I also originally had a kazoo in there, but it was just catching the ear a bit too much. You know, it's got that harsh kind of fuzz to it. So in the end, it just sounded a little bit obnoxious. But that Omatone had just the right amount of silliness, but you wouldn't necessarily notice it. But then if you listen right at the end, it kind of has a little feature. I definitely had to do a lot of pitch correction with that one just to keep it controlled, because it's quite a tough little instrument to play. Let's have a listen to the sax layers again. Oof. Maybe I should have done more pitch correction on that. I allowed things to be fairly nice and loose in this though, because that was the vibe that I was going for. And yeah, let's just keep going through. We got some keys. So whenever I'm grouping tracks, the things that I call keys are basically anything with a keyboard sort of like thing. So that could be mallets, sometimes includes harp. In this I've got a sort of pseudo accordion, which is a trick I often do. It's just the melodica, but pitched down an octave. So let's have a listen to that. So it sounds pretty nice because you have the breath giving it that natural sort of swell, and that's something that's quite hard to achieve convincingly with a sample, although the samples are pretty good. But what I like to do is play chords on the melodica, and then I've stuck Little Altar Boy on here and I've pitched it down -12, and so without the pitch shift it sounds like this, and then like this with the pitch down. And so I've actually blended the upper and the lower octaves there, which gives it a bit of a richer, bigger sound. Oh, the other thing that I like to do with the melodica / accordion is I use a free plugin actually called the Ozone Imager. So let's just have a quick look at that. So here's what it sounds like without the Ozone Imager. And here's what it sounds like with. It's a pretty clean stereo widener plugin, freebie. I highly recommend it. I can put a link to that in the description. What else we've got of interest? We've got some Glock. We've got some wobbly Rhodes. The wobbly Rhodes is a fun one. I got a little bit adventurous with this one and decided to use the sort of hidden feature of many Roland keyboards. You may not be aware that your Roland keyboard possibly has something. It's a little sensor. I'll shoot some B-roll of this so that you can see what I'm talking about, but it's got a little wing symbol and you can assign that to pitch, which means that when you move your hand over the sensor, it'll shift the pitch, which is amazing. I feel like a proper wizard, especially in this funny looking cardigan thing which I'm wearing, a poncho / robe. So that's very fun. We've got some harp, we've got some kind of normal sounding Rhodes, some offbeat chords. Keys acoustic effects. Okay, yeah, so now we're getting into guitars and things. So that was just a simple guitar strum with some effects on it. The effects that I'm using there are some echo boys, some tremolo, some vintage verb. What else we got? So at this point we've got a guitar melody. Once the track's had a chance to develop and establish all of the main ideas, then I bring in this really simple melody which just sits over the top of everything that you've heard already. This is a sort of compositional technique that I quite often use. When we kind of return to this familiar, comfortable groove, rather than just having the track kind of bubbling away as it was doing before, like this, I'm now adding a really simple top line. Da, da. So the idea there is, first of all, it creates a nice sense of development. It gives you a feeling of like, okay, there was a reason for me to get to this point. It's not just more of the same. It's not just a copy-paste job. There's something new. It's worth listening to the next section of the track. The other thing is, I'm very much keeping in mind the underscore nature of this track. So I don't want to have a melody, for example, that goes da 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 or something, because that'll just be incredibly distracting. And if there's somebody talking and the music's going on underneath, then all you'd be listening to is, well, you just hear a massive conflict, because generally speaking, the instruments that are playing that melody are going to be, they're likely to be in the same range as the human voice. So I like to create very spacious melodies that, you know, still have some interesting shape to them, still have little moments of surprise if possible, but just have a lot of space between them. So you know, like what I've done to just spice it up a little bit there is I've got the main melody on the I think it's the Glock and the guitar, but then underneath I've got a little bit of a complication in the accordion. You know, to me those little things are just what make the track, you know. It kind of gives everything that slightly more natural feeling. Little decorations like that, little tasty moments, little tasty treats and ear candy. Then let's talk about the ukes. So actually it's funny we haven't spoken about these yet, because these were the second element that I recorded. After coming up with this initial percussion groove in the intro, I wanted to figure out what was going to be the core of the track in terms of the rhythmic instruments, because I knew this was going to be a groove track primarily, and therefore groove means rhythm section, which includes percussion, drums, bass, maybe a rhythmic piano part or a rhythmic accordion part, and very likely a rhythmic guitar part. So in this case, I decided to use ukulele as the kind of core front and center rhythm part. And the reason for that was I just had, you know, a strong intuition that that would fit the vibe that I was going for, just something that has that natural, sunny, upbeat, very friendly kind of vibe. And also, I'd been practicing the ukulele chords, which you may have seen in one of my other videos, getting really comfortable with major and minor chords, so I decided it was time to put my knowledge to the test. I still had to do a little bit of fumbling around and lots of takes, but this is the ukulele part that I came up with that then sort of set the tone for the rest of what was to come. And so here's the ukulele part that I came up with, using the kind of Spanish strumming technique there, where you roll your fingers across the guitar, which is something my dad showed me many years ago when I was having a go on his guitar. The idea is slightly out of tune, but yeah, you get the idea. You're just using the back of your hand, your fingernails, and you're spreading your hand out. It's a really, really useful sound. Really gives you something that has a bit of spice and attack, and it's very fun and immediate. You know, it's just, to me, it had a little bit more energy than something that was just a simple sort of dum da dum da 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 kind of pattern. Because it's one of the first things that you hear, you're really trying to just hook the listener in, to draw them into your world that you're creating and give them a sense of like, hey, look at this, hey, look at that, you know, rather than like, oh, here's something that you've heard a million times before. So that's, you know, at some level, that's the kind of thing that was going through my head. Let's have a quick look through some of the other parts going on in the ukuleles. Got some little plucky bits. So that was quite a nice little transition idea, which I copied in the bass as well. Those sorts of things, they came, I don't know, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the process, once I'd sketched out the overall track in a fairly complete way. Then it became about adding some of these nice little details so that it didn't feel too repetitive. So, in context. And then here's the transition. And then the other thing that's highlighting that transition is some more body percussion, which in this case is me going with my mouth. So, you know, these tiny little details, you could say, who's going to notice that? But, well, you know, I don't really have an answer for that. I think I just did it because it was fun. So yeah, the ukulele is just kind of holding it down. I didn't bother double tracking it, I think. Although there are, as you can see, there are 2 lanes here. That's because I recorded it in 2 parts just so I could get a really clean sound. So I recorded this part. Rest, rest. And And then in the rest section, I added the other part. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that, and then together they sound like this. I wanted to get it as clean as possible, and so sometimes when you're moving between chords there can be a bit of intermediary noise. The other thing is I've panned them left and right slightly so that you get a nice little sort of stereo effect, which I think just creates a bit more of a fun feeling, you know, having things pan around like that. It's not too distracting, I don't think, and the vibe of this track is quite kind of bitty. In a way it's quite fragmented. Hopefully it gels together nicely, but it is kind of about all of these little bits. It's about all of these little toys. So for example, we've got things like this, which is a jaw harp. The track is chock full of these little elements, I guess, again, kind of inspired by that whole Jacob Collier thing, that sort of slightly excitable, here's a bunch of cool sounds that I found and made and discovered, and it's a bit of a sort of melting pot. So after the ukes, we've got the bass, finally, and the bass is really simple. It's just a single patch. I've used Trillion, and the patch that I'm using is called Trillion Acoustic 1 Full Range Character. Sounds really nice, no complaints. And then I've added a few little extra things here and there just to give it that live feel. Sorry, bass players, but I used a sample in this case. And finally, we've got a cello, apparently, which is really buried in there. Let's have a listen in isolation. So I guess the point of that was like this real like everything in the kitchen sink kind of feeling. It's like, yeah, why not a classical instrument as well? You know, we've got sax, ukulele, percussion, a guitar, Rhodes keyboard, voices, you know, all kinds of stuff. Let's just chuck a cello in there as well. So that was the kind of the thing that I was going for as well. I think like I haven't really used a lot of brass, that's the only thing, but I suppose I was going for quite a woody kind of sound, and maybe the brass felt like it was going to just grab the ear too much. Okay, so before we finish, I'll just start by playing the drums and percussion stem by itself, and then I'll gradually bring everything else in, and you can hear how it all sounds together. So here we go. Bass, ukulele, voice, Omatone, sax, keys, guitar, cello. And there you go. So that is how I created Round and About, my sort of Jacob Collier inspired groove track. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, if you liked this, then feel free to subscribe to my mailing list at vincewebb.substack.com and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm trying to post at least one video a week, sometimes more than that. And yeah, stay tuned. Hope to see you on the next video. Thanks very much for watching.